Hi everyone, Kimmy Stewart here with Historic College Park Book Club in Atlanta, Georgia. We are very excited to have Hank Early, who recently wrote Heaven's Crooked Finger. This is our July book. Please follow us at hcpbookclub.com. We're going to have author bio and then we are going to delve into the book. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Hank Early. I write under Hank Early. My real name is John Mantooth. The first book that I published under my pseudonym Hank Early is Heaven's Crooked Finger, and it's the first in a series. The series is the Earl Marcus series. Earl is the main character. And the second book, In the Valley of the Devil, just came out a couple weeks ago. The third book I'm working on right now, it's untitled at the moment, but it's scheduled to come out in November of 2019. The books are set in sort of a fictional area of North Georgia that I based loosely on where my grandparents lived and my parents grew up. I have also written under my real name, John Mantooth. I wrote a book called The Year of the Storm that was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award for first novel, and wrote a collection of short stories, Shoebox Trainwreck. I live in Hoover, Alabama. I have a wife and 2 children and 2 dogs, and my day job, or my yearly job, in the summer I can just be a full-time writer, but in the school year I'm a teacher.
What subject?
Social studies. Believe it or not. I used to teach English, and they took all the English classes away from the author, which still blows my mind a little bit, but I'm okay with it because
What grade?
I learned to love social studies. It's more fun to teach.
What grade do you teach?
7.
Oh, that's a good grade.
It is a good grade. I've taught, believe it or not, I've taught 7th grade for 20 years. This is my 21st year.
Wow.
And my wife's also a 7th grade teacher at a different school.
What school does she teach?
She teaches at Bumpus Middle School, which is in Hoover.
Okay.
And that's where my kids are in Hoover schools. And I'm down at Calera Middle School in Shelby County, so it's about a 30-minute drive from where I live.
And so where did you grow up?
I grew up in Montgomery from ages 7 to 18, but before that I was in Georgia. I was born in Carrollton, Georgia.
Yeah.
And lived there for a few years before moving to Douglasville, Georgia. And then my dad got a job in Alabama. We moved to Montgomery when I was 7.
And so this is your best friend, which I'm going to ask to come around the lampshade, from 9th grade. Hello,
Yep.
how are you?
Hey, how are you?
So did you know that this guy was going to be a writer when you guys were young?
I had a pretty good idea. He excelled in creative writing classes, and I would say this if he wasn't here, but there is nothing like hearing this guy tell stories, whether it's Halloween with the kids on the front porch, whether it's taking long road trips up the East Coast and him just coming up with random stories. A side note too, not to embarrass him or myself.
Oh, please do.
We were in a band in college and he wrote all the lyrics.
What was the name of the band?
The band was called Days of Gather. Well, speaking of Georgia, we tried. This didn't work out real well, but we tried to pattern ourselves on REM from Athens. I mean, they were our heroes growing up. But we wrote our own songs, so nobody could tell us we weren't playing them right. You know, we felt like if we played cover songs. But no, he tells stories unlike anybody I've ever heard tell stories before.
I think that's a little exaggerated.
No, I mean, so. But,
you just need to say thank you.
But no, he's had it coming for a long time, I think, going all the way back to high
And you're
school.
also a teacher.
I am. I teach at Hoover High School, which is the same system that his wife teaches in.
Very cool.
What grade do you teach?
I teach juniors and seniors, U.S. history, and then we have an IB school at Hoover, International Baccalaureate, so I teach the 2 senior IB classes. His daughter's in the IB program, so I'll teach her in a couple of years.
That's gonna be weird.
Oh,
That will be weird. So,
Now, did you both go to Maryville?
No, we went to St. James together, a school in Montgomery, and then at college. My college was more like a odyssey than a 4-year plan. I started in '90 at Sanford in Birmingham, and I finished in '98 at UAB. That's 8 years if you couldn't figure that out. And he was one of these people. Didn't you graduate in 4 or 5 maybe?
I did, but I mean, there were my parents told me no uncertain terms, listen, we'll pay for 4 years, but after that, you're kind of on your own. So
My parents told me that too. But yeah, but we kept in touch all those years. I would go to Maryville and he would come to Birmingham, and so we've always been buddies.
How did you come up with the, how did you come up with the, Hank
The
Early?
pseudonym?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this goes back to the books I wrote under my name, John Mantooth. The book I wrote, The Year of the Storm, was my first novel under my real name, and it was with Penguin, which was a pretty big publisher, and I was real excited about it, obviously, because I was sort of a young writer, and that was my dream to publish with a big publisher. But the book didn't do very well, and I think some of that was the book's fault, but I think some of it was probably Penguin's fault, and also my agent at the time, who was the only person that I knew in publishing. I mean, I was down here in Alabama, and she was like absolutely my lifeline to New York and all the publishing stuff. She decided to retire right after the book came out. And so there was just nobody to help me. I was completely isolated from what was going on with the book, and I hate to use the word tanked, but it just didn't do well. And so when I got a new agent a year or so later, who I really loved, and he, when we tried to sell my next book under John Mantooth, and this was 2015, we kept getting a lot of rejections, and the reason was not so much that they didn't like the book, it was the poor sales record of the first book, which I didn't ever realize how much that meant. They say if your first book bombs, you may be out of publishing.
That shouldn't matter, though.
But
to
it
me.
does. That was my thought. It shouldn't matter if the next book's great and they think they can sell it. Why not buy it? But that's the way it works. And so we never did sell that second book. We actually just tabled it, and he said, "Write something." No, that's my collection of stories. Okay. Yeah, that was that's been published. But the second book was it may be my favorite thing I've ever written. I don't know, but it was not a series or anything, but it was a story set in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Sort of a crime novel, but also sort of a bigger novel, I think, about class and the struggles of the lower class in this particular community. And I tend to use made up communities. It's just easier for me to not have to get all the details right. But anyway, so we never did sell that book, but he said, "Write something brand new, and we'll try that." And so I wrote Heaven's Crooked Finger, and the idea was to make it a series, and a series character with Earl Marcus. And we started getting some of the same replies, some of the same rejections from the major publishers.
Just based on your name.
Yeah, track record too bad. And finally we got Crooked Lane, which is not a major publisher. They're considered an independent, but they're an up-and-coming independent, and who they've had a best-selling author on their list, and they're really growing. And,
Is that you? The bestseller?
No, I'm not the bestseller. No.
Not yet.
If y'all
Who's
tell
the
all of your
bestseller?
friends.
Who's the bestseller?
Kate Holohan. I think she
Okay.
may have been USA Today.
Okay.
She does a lot of women's sort of fiction, mystery.
Beach reads.
Sort of, yeah. But anyway, they said, if you're willing to take a pseudonym, we want to buy it. And at first I was like, I won't take a pseudonym. I mean, what's John Mantooth? You don't get a better name than John Mantooth.
I know, it
still
really
feel
is
like
a great
That's a
name.
Yeah,
I would
it was
think you
nobody
would
ever
buy
forgot
it.
that name. But I thought about it, and I decided I want to do this. I want to stay in the game, so to speak. So I told my agent I'm willing to do whatever. And so we sold the book. We sold the 2 books. It was a 2-book deal, and then it was like, we'll determine the pseudonym later. And so I would email them occasionally. My editor, I'd email her pseudonyms, and I had some great ones because I am from the South, and my family is from North Georgia, and I was using names of my grandparents and their relatives and stuff like that, but they were always like, doesn't quite sound Southern enough. And I was like, okay, and I got fed up one day with this, and I finally said, you just tell me what you want the pseudonym to be. And it's like,
Bubble.
10 seconds later, the email came back, how
Bubble.
about Hank Early? It's like they had it locked and loaded, and I said, that's fine. And I've gotten used to it. At first, I didn't really like it, but I've gotten used to it, and that's why I write under
That's
Hank Early now. But I will say this: Hank Early has done better than John Mantooth ever did. So I'm okay with it.
Now, is this the first in the series?
This is the first Hank Early book. Yes.
In the series, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've already written the second one, is that
Second
what
one's out. The third one I'm writing right now, and it's coming out in November of 2019, and it's due to the publisher in December. So
So what is the second one?
What is the second?
This one
the
right
second
here.
one is in the Valley of the Devil, and it
Good
continues Earl
The
Marcus.
Valley of the what?
The
The
Devil.
Devil.
Yeah.
And must I say, it is fabulous.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And that's a hard thing. That was a new thing for me, is to write a follow-up, and it was very, very scary, and I didn't realize all the things you had to consider when you write a follow-up, because I wanted people to be able to read the second one and not have read the first one and not be completely confused.
You can do it.
I hope so. That was my goal. But at the same time, I wanted to carry over the characters, and so the people who had read the first one would say, oh, you know, they see growth in the characters and that sort of thing. So
that story's after.
that story's
I
after.
will say in the Valley of the Devil, you give enough references to the characters and to what's going on to where you can say, oh, okay, so there's another book.
Yeah, and hopefully, that's the goal. And then the third one, I don't know if there'll be a fourth one.
I hope so, because I sure did like the second one.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I'm just going to wait and see how they all do. You know, I'm contracted for the third one, and I've got ideas for standalone novels that I want to write that don't involve Earl Marcus. So chances are, after I write the third one, I'll be writing a standalone and trying to sell that, and maybe come back to Earl Marcus.
What's the status of the number 2 that
That we
never
could never
got
sell?
anywhere? No, the as John Mantooth. The number 2 that
The
didn't
Year of the
make-
Storm.
Yeah, no, the Year of the Storm I thought was your first.
It was okay.
And
So the
then
second book I
one
wrote, we
that
never
kind of-
published it.
Well, I mean, where is it? Have you just put it on a shelf?
Can you
on my hard
republish
drive.
it?
You can email it to me, I'll read it.
I think you say,
That's
I'm
what
a
I
great
thought.
editor, send it to me, I'd love to see it.
Well,
And
I
wouldn't
appreciate
steal
that.
it from you either. I don't steal.
I appreciate that. The idea that my agent and I have is that we're going to try to revisit later down the road when, and this is hopeful looking at it, but hopefully there'll be a point where publishers are saying, okay, we want something more by this guy, and they're actually asking, where's the next thing, and then we're going to pull it out. So and just move forward with what's been more successful
I
right
bought
now.
both those on Amazon, and 2 people have already reached out to me to get a recommendation, wanted me to recommend it.
Oh,
What are my
really?
recommendation on it?
So through Amazon they did? Cool.
Do you have any intention of writing anything from the mother's perspective in this? Because that's the story I felt was really
Oh,
From a
Yeah.
what
the
perspective?
mother's
females.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I was
tough.
going to ask you that. Are you able to do that?
Well, I mean, I have not thought about doing it, but I mean, I have written from female perspectives before, but I haven't thought about doing that. Now,
She was the character I was most curious about. You know, her position, her involvement, or why she wasn't more
there's
involved.
a little bit about her in the second book,
Yeah.
but there's probably still a little bit of mystery there. She, I guess my take on her is that she's not a bad person, but at the same time, when you allow things to go on like she did, and she's not the kind of person that stands up either.
Right.
But yeah, I think that would make a very interesting story.
Which mother are you talking about?
Well, I'm assuming she's talking about Earl's
Earl's
mother.
Earl's
Yeah.
mother.
Earl's
What's her
mother.
name?
Because there were so
Lisa?
many mamas in there, you know?
Well, that's
There really
it
was.
was green.
So-
And Heaven's Crooked Finger? There's a lot of
So where does Mantooth come from? What kind of name is that? Where did that come from?
I'm not real sure. I have a couple people, like when I was a kid, the phone rang one night, my dad picked it up and he talked for a while, and we asked him, who are you talking to? And he said that was somebody from Oklahoma calling to locate Mantooth, and he said that there's a whole tribe of Cherokee Indians with that name. Now, I don't know, I
That's
don't know.
true, though.
Well, you
In
remember I
Cherokee, that's
asked
a
you
Cherokee
if you
surname.
were related to the Mantooth
Mantooth.
Interiors
I don't
in
think I am.
How could you not be related
Well,
to
I'll tell you a
Mantooth
funny story.
Interiors? Because it's Mantooth.
It's more common name than you think, because my freshman year at Sanford, I was sitting in class and the teacher was calling roll by last names, and he got to Mantooth, and me and the guy sitting next to me raised our hand and said, here. And we looked at each other like, what the heck is going on here? And he was Mark Mantooth, and I was John Mantooth, and we couldn't figure out any way we were related. He may have been related to those Homewood Mantooths, and maybe we are somewhere down the line.
Has to
but I don't.
be. It's just such an unusual name.
Yeah, there's actually there's some in, like I said, Oklahoma, and there's a lot in the North Georgia, Southern Tennessee area, as I understand. So, but I've never officially researched the name or anything. That's on my to-do list.
So my husband and I were driving to Lake Guntersville one weekend, and there's an area in Alabama called Sandtown, I think, or
Sand Mountain?
Sand Mountain. So they have people who do that snake worshiping thing,
Yes.
and there was actually a
Dennis
very
Covington's
prominent guy who
Yeah.
like died from a
Oh,
snake
no.
bite,
Okay.
which is
I thought you
like,
were talking about Dennis
I mean,
Covington.
these people are just so backwards. You know, I love snakeskin purses and shoes. Not gonna worship with them.
Well, there's a book called Sin and Salvation on Sand Mountain by
Yes,
Dennis Covington.
yes,
And,
absolutely.
that would, if you're interested in it, that would be the book to read. That's a nonfiction account. He went up there. I
Oh,
think
that's
he,
a real thing?
yeah, he
Yes,
even
they
the author
do
even
that.
handled snakes himself.
And he
Um,
got bit and like died. I mean, they're like freaky,
Yeah.
unfortunate.
To me, it was
backward
just,
kind of
Eggs.
I don't know. When I was coming up with the idea for the character, I thought, you know, I want this guy to have some sort of brokenness in his past or something, and I immediately went to, because I came up in a very sort of I call it a scary church environment.
Was
So-
it Southern Baptist, perhaps?
No, it wasn't. It was, my grandmother was.
Because I wouldn't do that to
It's
anybody.
much worse.
Yeah, my grandmother was Assemblies of God, and I don't know if
I don't
y'all.
even know
I
what
hope,
that is.
What
I hope
know.
nobody's Assemblies
George
of God
would know
here.
what it
What I've
is.
got.
Assembly.
Assembly.
Assemblies of
Oh,
God.
yeah. They're everywhere.
Okay. Well, in my grandmother's particular church, the first time I went there as a child, I was just so mortified because this preacher was just screaming about hell, and he was stomping his foot, and it was just something that stayed with me. And my grandmother was very much like that too, and she had a lot. The character Granny in the book is based on all the good stuff about my grandmother, but none of the bad stuff, because she had a lot of scary stuff about her too. She would talk about hell constantly, and about how we were going to hell, and if we didn't get this straight, and that's just sort of. My mother tried to get away from that somewhat as they moved away from Georgia, but she never could quite get away from it. And so I think Earl Marcus was sort of like, I wanted to see a character get away from it, and I felt like I have, like I discovered when I met my wife that she went to a Methodist church there. And I went there, I was like, what? I mean, nobody
So
screamed at me.
calm.
Nobody did anything that scared me. Nobody spoke in tongues. You
Now,
know,
do they also have alcohol in Methodist churches?
Yeah, they have some.
Yay!
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Now, you just said you wanted to see a character that got away from it, but he didn't get away from it until he went back and resolved it,
Right.
right? He
Right.
carried it.
Yeah, he wanted to get away from it by leaving, but is that, do you really ever get away from anything? I mean, you don't really get away from stuff when you just leave. You have to deal with it. So,
So you
yeah.
said loosely based
Exactly.
on somewhere in North Georgia that's your grandparents.
Yeah,
What
my-
is that community?
Well,
Like
they lived in
Deliverance?
Dalton, Georgia. My grandmother lived out in the county, in Whitfield County, and there were just always people around her. Like I remember this guy named Brother Marcus that used to come over, and Brother Marcus, there's the yeah, and he scared me, and so did his wife, because they were always talking about hell, and there's just that was sort of my idea, is to try to bring like a crime novel into that world a little bit. And now the second book doesn't quite deal with the religious world as much, although I think there's still some of that, but it deals with more, but I think there's a little bit more of a political corruptness and going on in the second one. Yeah,
Is
well,
it in the same
it's the same
location?
community, same
Genre.
characters.
That's always in.
So-
Mountain folks are interested in
Yeah.
nothing else.
He has the same characters, but he also added a few new characters. I'm dying to know. I can't wait for your next book.
So did Deliverance, did you ever see the movie
I
Deliverance?
read the book Deliverance.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I have a cabin up in North Georgia, and part of my criteria was that it was gated. And if we heard banjos, we fled.
Yeah, right.
But did that have any, because this kind of had that feel of just people who were kind of inbred with church specifically, and they were just in their own little wackadoodle world. But it kind of felt like that, like it was
Yeah, I'm
suffocating
sure that book had
almost.
something to do with it. I mean, I don't really consciously think about stuff like that, but now that you mention, I'm sure that had some impact on it. And just, I mean, honestly, when I look around today, I still see people sort of in wackadoodle worlds. I mean, just not even
This
in.
world I was in.
I mean, so I mean, I think there was part of that in it too, and then just with my, I think for me, there's always, this is gonna sound really cliche, but it personally, I've sort of been on a journey through dealing with this religious stuff a little bit.
How old are you?
I'm 46.
You're still a puppy.
Thanks.
Well, what I thought was interesting was his ability to see that it was all about control, and that his father was really, it was his way of controlling people across the board,
Yeah.
and that people actually allowed him to control them, and the fear was ruling not only the people but his father as well,
Yeah.
because he was fearful of not being in control.
Right, yeah, and that's so powerful is the fear factor. And sometimes I think people want somebody to just tell them what to do, and then there's a you can kind of check out at that point, and you can live just according to somebody else's rules and guidelines.
But almost like a cult leader.
Yeah.
So if you think about Charles Manson and the guy from, who's the guy who went to, was it Ghana?
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones. So he was very charismatic.
Yeah.
It seemed, and you really captured that in the
Well,
book.
that was definitely something that was on my mind because I've always been fascinated by those kind of figures. So I think that was why his dad ended up being
Because
like
they
that.
just blindly followed him.
Yeah.
You know?
And one of the things, and I've been thinking about a lot with cults and have read about it and stuff, is so many times people who get into cults, it's not so crazy when they first get in, but it gradually gets crazier. And then by the time they realize, oh my gosh, I'm in something crazy, they have to deny everything they believe for so long, and that's just hard to do. And I think there's part of that in the book too, is that even when Earl, all these years later, there's times where he's like, maybe I really am going to hell. You know, I mean, Daddy's sitting here telling me that I'm going to hell. Maybe after all this time, maybe he's right after all. And I guess that's something that I had to work through in my own life because, like I said, I came up in that environment and saw my mom struggle with it, and saw my dad. My dad sort of rejected all of it. He didn't go to church. He wouldn't go to church, and I see why now. I mean, I totally relate to my dad now because it was some of the stuff that was happening even at my mom's churches when we were in Montgomery was weird to me.
Do you have
Not the
siblings?
Methodist church.
Yeah. No, this was not the Methodist church.
Okay.
No, my mother
The
continued
other
trying to
one,
find
okay.
lighter versions of my grandmother's church that were easier to deal with,
I
a
got
little more
you.
kid friendly, but they were still crazy. I
Very
think.
rigid, totally rigid.
Rigid and yeah.
Very rigid.
So tell me about your brothers and sisters.
My brother is 4 years older than me, and he is a real estate agent, and believe it or not, a basketball coach. He does both, and he's in Montgomery. And my sister is 6 years younger than me, and she's in Kentucky right now. And
So there's three of you?
three of us.
So you're Marsha. Brady Bunch, Marsha,
So is she the middle?
You're the middle.
I'm
yeah.
the middle, yeah.
You're Marsha. A very accomplished Marsha. What do your students think about the books?
They don't, my students are so low level.
Oh,
You added that part. They're seventh graders.
you
That's what I'm
mean
gonna say.
they're seventh graders and that they
They
would
don't-
not read
kids don't read.
They
this?
don't
The world's
get,
about them, not
they don't
you.
get the connect, they haven't quite figured out the pseudonym thing yet.
Yeah.
They found out about my John Mantooth books, but they're hard to find now. One of them's out of print. But every now and then a kid will show up with
They're
one
both
of my.
available on Amazon. I just looked.
Right, yeah, but technically you're
That's
the one's
my
out of
IT
print.
girl over there.
But they'll show up with them time to time and ask me about them and that sort of thing. But Hank Early, I guess that's just one step too far for them to investigate. They haven't caught on to the Hank Early thing, which I'm fine with because none of these books are for kids.
Right.
And when they have asked me about them, I'll say, look, I didn't write that book for a kid. You need to ask your parents before you read it. Because The Year of the Storm, my first book, is not for kids either. And that's
Did
the
you
one they
give
usually
these
buy.
to your wife and say, hey, read this, what do you think? Or do you give it to somebody else? Or-
Well, I have a buddy in Ohio who's also a writer, Kurt Dinan.
Is he a member of First Assembly guy?
No, absolutely not. He's probably an atheist, but his name, he's a very good writer. He's written a book called Don't Get Caught, and it's a young adult book. So that's a book my kids can read. In fact, I have it in my classroom, and I encourage them to read it. And it actually got optioned for a Netflix series recently, and then the producer left and everything. It's like in limbo right now. You know how that stuff goes. But anyway,
We're in the book anyway. They like
it's a great book. So funny.
Yeah.
But I always send him my stuff, and in fact, in the second book,
Yeah,
I
you
think
did that.
in the acknowledgments I mentioned that him as he's my ideal reader in a sense because he's always telling me, okay, good, but I need something to happen soon. And I'm a writer that sometimes will get bogged down in a scene and just want to elaborate.
I did notice that in Heaven's Crooked Finger. She and I were talking about it. I
I
was
wasn't
like,
gonna
okay,
say
he's a
that.
little wordy.
Yeah, I can get that way, and like I'm doing now, I guess. But I always think of him now. Okay, get to it, move it on. You know.
Yeah.
So why did I bring up Kurt anyway? Oh, you asked about who reads my stuff. So he always reads for me, and my wife does read certain drafts. Sometimes I'll have her read a draft. I write a lot of drafts, so I'll have her read a draft, but she doesn't read every draft necessarily.
Do you write or type?
Oh, type. Yeah. I couldn't write.
From an economical standpoint, do you have to put up money to the publisher to get them to do this? Or is it done based on,
That's self.
I guess?
Yeah, you don't have to pay anything. The only thing that happens is my agent takes his fee out of when I make money, my agent makes money.
And do you make money?
Yeah, I make money. I do make money.
That's
I don't make enough to quit my job, but I'm hoping one day.
But you may one day.
Yeah, I'm
You will,
hoping one day
you
I will.
These two books are
Thank you.
fabulous.
I hope you're right. I can retire in. I've got 5 more years, and
That's
I'll be
it?
eligible for retirement.
Wow.
So my goal is to be able to retire and just write and take my retirement and make what I'm making now. I'd be fine if I could do that. I'd be fine.
So are you ever in the car? And so I write as well. So you ever in the car where you're just like, oh my God, I've got to pull over and write this down? Or do you go somewhere that inspires you to write, or do you have to be in a certain area
Well,
to
you
write?
mentioned the Mantooth furniture. If you ever go down to O. Henry's coffee shop in the summer,
Which O. Henry's?
the one right down from Mantooth's Furniture, it's down in downtown Homewood. It's not the one in Brookwood Mall. It's downtown
Well,
Homewood.
we have it. So I'm in Highland Avenue, so
Okay.
we have
There's
one
an O.
down
Henry's
there.
there too. Yeah,
I don't know that one.
I go to the downtown Homewood one almost. Well, I go every day that I don't have something else to do, and I write in the mornings.
And you just kind of sit and nest and write.
Yeah, I just like their coffee, and I like it's just a
O.
good place for me
Henry's
to
is the
write.
bomb.
Yeah, my wife's
Yeah.
sort of not a fan of it because she's like, this is like every time you go, that's a 20-minute drive over there. Why can't you just write at home? But when I try to write at home, I always get interrupted, so I like going to the.
You're not interrupted in the coffee shop? I would think.
No, not
No,
at all. Nobody will
people
talk.
leave
I'm the
you
kind of person
alone.
that can sit there and nobody will talk to me, and I'm fine with that. I like that. But at home, my
Yeah,
kids
it's
come up to me.
wonderful when he does. They don't tell me, you know.
Who?
People just come and talk to you, or
Yeah.
you're writing, or they just want to chat.
No, everybody knows got a laptop.
You can't control
So-
your kids not to bother you at home?
No, I can't. And then the dogs don't help either.
What kind of dogs do you have?
They're both mixed, but we recently had to put a diaper on one, and that's been an issue.
You can't put a sign on the door, no interruptions for this hour?
I could. I haven't
Sometimes
tried
it's
that.
fun though to go somewhere
No,
else.
that's
But the other thing that happens to me at home is I tend to fall asleep. When I'm at home, it's so easy to say, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna go lay down for a few minutes. But when you're somewhere else, I feel like I'm at work when I'm there. If that makes any sense. Like I've gone someplace,
Yeah.
okay, I'm at work, now's my time to write. And I do write at home some, especially this fall when the deadline gets closer and I won't be able to go over there after school. I'll come home and I'll sit down and I'll write. But in the summers, when I have more free time, I go over there, probably there by 7:30 in the morning. I'll write till about 11, and then I'm done for the day.
That's very
So,
disciplined.
So your deadline for November is this fall?
it's this December.
Oh, wow.
And the book will come out in next
Wow.
November.
It takes that long to publication. Wow.
Well, they build in a little time for like revisions and stuff
Yeah.
because the editor will have some problem. I mean, they always do. There'll be some things to change and that sort of thing. And there'll be copy edits along the way. So that's all kind of built into the time frame.
Have you always been this disciplined? This requires a lot, you know, a lot.
Yeah.
The late Celestine simply
no.
used to say that was the hardest part of writing.
It
was the
is.
discipline.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is one thing that I have been pretty good at. When I turned 30, I'd always wanted to be a writer. Like he said, you know, I always wrote lyrics and I was in creative writing and I loved writing, but all through college and high school and really even through my 20s, I did not have the discipline to do it. It was like a thought that I had, like, oh, I want to write a book one day.
Mm-hmm.
But when I turned 30 and we had also just had my daughter at that time, it just kind of dawned on me, it's like, you know, if you're ever going to do it, you better try it. And so I sat down right after New Year's, because my birthday's in December, so it was right after New Year's when I turned 30 and I started writing. I wrote the worst book that you guys can probably imagine. And it was just horrendous. It was basically like a Lord of the Rings rip-off fantasy novel. But I wrote it.
You wrote it.
I wrote it. I finished it. And then I wrote another book that was pretty bad. And then probably a couple more until I realized that I don't know how to do this at all. And I discovered that I had never really learned how to tell a story. So I joined an online community that is still around, but it's not nearly what it was. It's called Zoetrope.
It's
Y'all
called
heard of
what?
Zoetrope? Zoetrope. Francis Ford Coppola has a winery.
Yeah,
And-
Napa.
Yeah, he
That's what I know
sponsored
where that is.
He sponsored a
That's
online
my favorite
community.
winery in the world.
Okay,
is the
yeah.
Coppola
Don't
Winery in
distract
Napa.
him. Let him
He
finish.
sponsored this online community for writers. It
The
was free to
Gamble family
join.
winery is
And everybody in there was writing short stories. And I thought, I'll try a short story. And I wrote a short story, and people liked it on the site. They reviewed it, and I thought, okay, well, this is good. That only took a week as compared to like 6 months to write a novel. So I started writing more and more short stories. And I learned, I think, in the writing of the short stories, how to tell a story a little bit better. Because in a short story, you get to practice the beginning, the middle, and the end. And when you're writing novels, so many times you just practice the beginning over and over again because you give up on it. And then by the time you finally do get to write one all the way through, the ending's terrible because you've never practiced endings. And so the short stories really helped me. I started getting confidence with short stories. I published a few, started making a little money off that. Then I published my collection of stories, and then I came back and said, I'm going to try a novel again. And that was the Year of the Storm that I published with Penguin.
That's
So,
very enlightening.
Is your grandmother alive?
no.
So she never got to read any
No,
of this, right?
no.
It would be interesting to see what she thought about.
It's funny because my aunt, her daughter, when she read the book, and I was cringing when she told me she read the book, because I thought she was going to side with the church, like the preacher and everybody. But luckily she didn't. But she did say, I thought I saw Granny, my mom in there, and there was a little bit in the Granny character in the book.
Oh,
Because
so
she
I
was
asked you to make
precious.
him with her Because and I was going to ask you, why was she black and why did you do the interracial couple?
I don't really know why I did that.
Well, it
Just-
made it interesting.
I
it was
think,
a
yeah, I
good
think
twist.
it was just I
Yeah.
wanted to introduce an element into the community because that would maybe cause some conflict for it.
So your
There's a lot
granny
of
in the
conflict.
book, your
There's
granny
definitely
was
a
a
lot of
black
conflict.
lady,
A
a
lot.
black granny.
Well, I don't want to say that was my granny, but there were elements that were based,
On her.
Loosely based.
yeah, loosely, yeah, because that's how my aunt used
So
to.
she really was not in the cult religion then.
Well, see, I took what I said, the good parts of my grandmother. Like, my grandmother was a wonderful lady, but she had this other side to her that scared me when it was about
Right.
hell. It was, every other thing was about hell, but she was very much of a caretaker for others, and she, I have to tell y'all this story. The name Earl Marcus, Marcus is a name on my dad's side, and then Earl, my grandmother, when I was a kid, and my brother and my male cousins, she used to always say whenever we were being lazy or good for nothing, she'd say, oh, you're just like your Uncle Earl. Every time she would say that. And I'd never met my Uncle Earl, But I started thinking, well, dang, he must not be that bad if we're just like Uncle Earl, you know. And so I wanted to name him Earl because I wanted to kind of redeem that name. I did finally meet him when I was a lot older, and the sad thing is Uncle Earl had lost like 3 of his toes in Korea. And he had he was very unhealthy, but to my grandmother, he was lazy. You know, that was just who she was. But she was a complicated woman.
But Korea would mess anyone up, I think.
Yeah.
So
Was it hard for you to reveal the inner part of yourself to the public? Because you know there's always.
It's not for me when I write. It's sort of hard for me when I'm talking and like meeting people. I'm not usually that open about things, but for whatever reason, writing's never been difficult for me to reveal that kind of stuff because that's just, I don't know, just
That's good.
nobody's there when I'm writing it. And then I'm not there when they're reading it. So it's only situations like this where I have to deal with it.
That's good. That's good to hear.
who was your favorite character in the book? Was it Earl? Or
No,
was
I think it was probably Rufus.
Rufus was my favorite too.
I love her.
But then in the second book it's Ronnie. Y'all might not remember Ronnie much from the first book.
Ronnie plays a huge
kid.
role in the second book.
He kind of takes over the second book a little bit.
Where's Ronnie in the first book?
Ronnie is the
Ronnie was in the
general
shop
from
with the
church.
girl that's got the
like-
shotgun fixing to shoot.
That's across
Oh,
the creek
the
from
2
Rufus.
No,
kids.
that's not Ronnie. You're talking about the girl. You're talking about the girl and the guy that
That's
escaped.
Todd.
That's
Oh,
right.
I know who you're talking about.
But no, yeah, I do. They're the young kids. Yeah.
Ronnie's the guy that came and patted him on the shoulder.
Ronnie's the guy that lived across the creek from
Right.
Rufus.
And,
And
Todd-
he's related. His grandfather
Thrash.
was Billy Thrash,
Right.
who was Earl's father's best friend.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the first book, he helps Earl go marry RJ.
Right.
And he's pretty minor in the first book, so I totally understand if you don't remember him. But the second book,
Well, he made
He
it.
does
but in
a
the
lot
last,
more.
But in the last book, in the first book, he made a huge, like at the very end, he helped him with,
right?
He said leave Rufus alone.
Yeah.
and that was the only one he trusted.
So they have that shared secret.
How,
going
you
into
never
book 2.
tell us how Rufus lost his vision.
It's coming
Yes,
in
it
book
comes
3.
in book.
Okay.
No, in
Oh,
book 2, you said you
snap.
mentioned all
I
that.
just want
Well, I might have
to know.
mentioned that he had chemical burns, but
Yeah, but yeah.
what else
Okay,
did I say?
okay.
Tell me if he said more, because I need to know this. Did I say more?
Well, I thought you did.
Wow, I hope I didn't. No, because that's a large part of book
It's
3.
from his. Okay.
It's from his what?
Yeah, tell me.
I
I thought you said how he got his burns too, but I can't quite.
No, in the second book, there's let me think who it was. He was having a conversation with somebody about him being blind. But I guess you did only say he had chemical burns. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, because Earl doesn't know how he was blind. He never really asked him because he just gets the sense that Rufus doesn't want to talk
Oh, he told.
about
I thought he told the librarian. Sheila? What's her name?
it. Susan?
Susan.
I don't think he did, but if he did, I might. That's going to be important. But I really don't think he did because
Okay.
I didn't really
you
know
know,
until
look,
it was one of those things. I didn't really know how he was blind, and I kept putting it off. And then this third book.
it touched on it just a little bit.
Okay.
But
okay.
Rufus was someone who I would go hang out with.
Yeah.
Hey, let's have a
That's like all the
cocktail
guys
and
did.
let's talk about it. You know.
I kept on thinking that Rufus really wasn't blind.
Yeah, he gets around pretty well for somebody, doesn't he? That's,
So if you didn't know
I like-
how he was blind in the first book, then why did you decide for him to be blind?
I don't know why did I decide anything?
Because
I don't
he
know. I
could.
don't know why I decided that thing. But I guess I knew that there was going to be a story there, and in my back of my mind, I had an idea why he was blind. But now I'm starting to flesh that story out a little bit. So to say I didn't know why he was blind is a little bit misleading, but I didn't know all the details of his blindness.
Will it always be set in Cooley County?
Well, this next book takes place. A lot of it takes place down on the Georgia-South Carolina line. Along
But still in that area.
Yeah, still in the area. Mm-hmm. But Earl does leave the mountains in the next book to do something. Yeah.
All right, how about you? Who is your favorite character?
Oh
Putting
man,
you
in
on
the
the
second
spot.
in the second book, I would get so mad. Well, I guess I don't know. You've
All
read
right.
the second book. I would get so mad at Ronnie but I guess that was a good thing because you want the character to come alive.
He came
But
along.
God, I just felt like it's a shame it's fiction because I got to meet Rufus. You know, and to
Yeah.
me, to
I
me,
asked you if you were Rufus.
well, to me, the fact that I'm not. I can see y'all pretty well, but to me, the fact that Rufus is blind brings everything else into focus a little more clearly.
Absolutely.
He sees things more clearly than most people in that county. He knows everybody better. He's got a sense of the history. You know, he remembers Earl's father well, what we used to go on in church. And it's almost like everybody who has sight just lets that go by. But he has these vivid memories of, and it just comes alive more, I think. The fact that he sees everything better even though he's blind, I guess. So I know Rufus that seems to be most people's favorite, but God, he is so easy to identify with, and you kind of want to be on his side, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
I think the blindness adds to the because I like I did the mystery of Rufus a little bit too.
Yeah.
And I think the blindness adds to he's sort of this mysterious guy that has a past that nobody's really sure about, and he's got some secrets that go along with that past.
And he's,
Will we learn them in the third book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you
Did
should.
you know someone, I'm sorry, did you know someone who didn't have, that you,
Not that I can think of.
well, in the way that he described, like the way that he never like. In the second book, there was something that happens, and most people who go blind, you know, their eyes will change different colors, and from what I gathered, Rufus's eyes never changed. They stayed the same. They stayed the same, in my mind.
Yeah.
And so whenever when it happened in the second book, what happened with in the very beginning, whenever Jeb was coming to the library.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay. And so I thought, oh, so nobody really knows that he's blind because he can look at you and you think that he's looking straight at you,
Right.
and he's really not looking at you because he's blind.
Yeah, he's definitely not your average blind person.
And what Rufus has been able to do that not everyone has been able to do who can see is he said whenever you're blind you lose one of your senses. And he said that, and he can tell a difference in people's voices
Yeah.
whenever not everyone else can.
Right. Yeah.
here's a true thing. I have a cousin who is deceased, lived at the top of Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, with his
Okay.
sister and brother-in-law. He could walk in the room and he
Which
could
is
tell
where
from
Rock
the
City
footsteps.
is.
He can tell what?
Walk in the room, he could tell he walked in the footsteps.
Wow.
He also was mentally deficient, but sweetest, his name was Wallace, but lived into his 60s. But the footsteps were the things that would kill me. He would say,
Because
"Look,
your
when
other
you come
senses
to
are
visit."
heightened.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how Rufus does with like the sounds of the trucks. Like he always knows Earl's truck,
And that's-
coming up, and he always, Earl thinks he'll surprise him, but he doesn't.
those
because
senses are
Rufus-
so sharp.
When I read the two books, I think everybody who grows up in the Deep South can identify with somebody like him.
Are we in the Deep South where we are now?
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
Oh,
I don't think we are.
we
Well,
are.
I think
Baton
if
Rouge,
you go
Louisiana,
further
that's-
into Alabama, you're in the
Atlanta
Deep
might be a
South.
The- the-
I don't think
metropolitan
Atlanta's
area,
the
but
Deep
we
South.
are deep south.
Yeah, Atlanta. Yeah, despite Atlanta's size,
It's borderline.
Some of us like to pretend
but
we're
it's
sophisticated.
it's Rufus's intuition too. I mean, I had
Yeah.
a grandmother that could tell if bad weather was coming because of the way the train whistle sounded when it came through town. Because of the so it's that's what I identify with Rufus, just the intuition
That's
that he had. So
I liked the grandmother character. Okay.
A lot of people have told me
Great,
that was the
yeah,
favorite
that,
character.
just the fact that she took him in and she took care of him. And what was surprising to me was that the rest of the congregation, maybe because she was a midwife and they needed her in the community, allowed her to do that.
Right.
And didn't really put up a fight, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what surprised me.
Yeah, I think when he was sort of excommunicated from the church and the community, which they were really inseparable there. I think that was probably as far as most of the people were willing to go. I think in my mind, there was probably some relief that he found some place to stay and be okay, but he still wasn't in the community, so they could feel like he was out of the community.
So correct me if I'm wrong, he moved in with her after he got snake bit, right?
Yeah, he was bitten by the snake,
He was
and
kicked
then
out of the church.
and then he had
Yeah,
this whole
from his
thing
dad.
with Maggie, the girl that killed
Yeah.
herself, and
How did you come up with all that?
how did I come up with it?
That was something.
He's
I
a
was like,
writer.
that's creepy. No, I was like,
A
that
good
is just
one.
like really creepy.
Did you know
Like,
anybody in a
this
snake
torture,
church?
like, that was just like, you tortured, not only did you torture her, but you left marks on their bodies and you.
Sorry, I
No,
mean.
I
All right.
was
My-
just curious.
When you
Friends that I
started
have
doing about
that
the face
knew me
things and
before
the blood stuff,
they
I
read the
remember.
books. They're like, I can't believe John wrote that.
No,
And
it
That's
had
kinda
a
part of the
great
storytelling.
component to the book.
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
curious.
I don't know,
Did you
I mean-
know?
it's just my
He tells
growing up
horror
reading
stories.
books like that, and it just
Your
I bet
imagination
it's
is
fun on the
great.
trip.
thank you. That's
But I was cringing when all the pretty girls started
Yes.
disappearing. I was thinking, oh gosh, I just can't.
I
My
thought they were sticking them in the well
my
and everything.
imagination was far worse than what. Well, actually, the
thought that.
electrocution thing was pretty darn bad,
yeah.
but it was a great twist into the book because I kept thinking, oh my gosh. I mean, it was a great murder mystery. You
Appreciate
know,
that.
the
'cause
whole thing.
That's really where I'm sort of an outsider because I ended up getting published by this publisher that exclusively publishes mysteries. But I don't feel like my stuff's always mysteries. I feel like my stuff, like there may be a mystery in it, but it's also like thriller, and it also sort of edges into horror a little bit sometimes. That's just,
Do you like horror?
I do.
I love horror movies.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, have you
Well,
seen
I-
Hereditary yet?
Not yet, but I really want to.
Oh,
I've been trying to
snap.
talk my daughter into
What?
seeing it.
Which
It's-
one?
It's a movie you don't want to see it.
What
It's
is it?
Hereditary. It's really. Did you see the
Hereditary is the
Dexter
name of it?
series?
I never watched Dexter. no.
I've seen Dexter, yes.
You
but I
gotta
have to
watch
say,
Dexter. It's the bomb.
I am known in my family and on girls' trips to talk in my sleep. So someone's gonna be hearing about a snake crawling through my one night. It's coming.
Yeah.
Because that snake bit was detailed and it
Yeah.
totally freaked me out.
Well, the first book I wrote under my name was, I said it was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award. That's the horror
Yeah, horror, I
award.
think Bram Stoker.
And
Oh.
I saw it when I wrote it more of a coming of age story. It's about a kid in Alabama in a small town who's sort of whose mother and sister go missing, and this old man shows up at his house who might have been sort of an antecedent of Rufus maybe, but he could see, and he showed up at his house and one night and said, I know where they are. I know where your mother and sister are. And the book kind of ensues from that.
What's the name of the book?
The Year of the Storm.
The Year of the Storm.
Okay.
It-
I gotta read that.
It's set in Alabama, and the kid has to decide whether to trust the old man or not trust him, because there's a good chance this old man may have been the one that killed him, or there's a good chance he's just crazy. But so that's sort of what the tension in the book is, whether to trust him or not. And it was considered by some people a horror novel, and got a lot of horror readers because it does have some, I guess, supernatural aspects. There's some hints of, well, you can read the book different ways. I'll just say it like that. You can read it different ways. You can read it and say that was all supernatural, or you can read it and say that was all realistic.
So what happened to
Terry
Lester's
Kay, you know Terry Kay.
daughter?
Bailey,
Bailey, yeah.
last I remember about Bailey, she was staying like with some foster parents, I think.
Yes, but I mean, I was like, I just wanted to know if Lester was ever gonna. Lester was.
Lester's still in jail.
I know Lester and Billy are still in jail. Ronnie and Earl
Yeah.
visit them.
Right.
So I loved how you developed Lester. I thought
Yes.
was the most multi-layered of the characters, and I wonder if having a brother contributes to your ability to write Earl's understanding of his brother. And
A little bit, because like Lester, my brother's older, and like Lester and Earl, I think my brother and I are very different. We've always had a hard time communicating about stuff. Really?
Even now, as adults.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty common between brothers.
Yeah.
In the South especially.
Yeah. The only thing we ever really talk about is sports. And
That's a safe subject for a man.
I guess so.
It
Yeah.
is,
And I love my brother. I think the world of my
Yeah.
brother. But we never really have connected on. This is one I wish we weren't videoing a little bit, but anyway. So yeah, there may be some of that.
The sports thing works, and he's very modest and wouldn't tell you this, but he was quite the high school basketball player.
He
And
was?
I got a first-hand look at that for 2 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
His older brother was a great basketball player too, so
About 80
basketball
pounds
There's
ago.
a story in that.
basketball was kind of the theme in the Mantooth family.
So I like how you're doing an Earl Marcus series. I'm a huge, I love John Patterson.
James
James
Patterson.
Patterson, yeah.
I'm tired of him. He writes the same
Right,
thing.
well,
every
yes,
day.
Yeah, it's
I
kinda
stopped
over
reading
and
them
over.
for a minute, but
He does.
I really enjoy. Like now that I know you have a third book coming out, I'm just so excited. I'm like, okay, I have an idea for a fourth book.
Let me know.
Have you
I
ever?
love it. I mean, it
Well,
is.
I think the series thing's been good for sales overall because people, that like the first book, they're going to immediately look for a second book.
As soon as I read the
Yeah.
last page, I knew immediately. I Googled it and I told Amy, I said, oh my gosh, he wrote another book. I just ordered us 2 on Amazon.
And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a different approach. I've never written a series before, and it's
Well,
fun
keep
to
on
kind of
doing
get
it.
to know the characters and see them change, and to have stuff like backstories. See, the thing I love the most about writing, and this is probably may go to your question earlier, I think, about you didn't know. I like surprising myself when I write.
Yeah.
If I tried to outline a whole book one time, and I stopped after like the 3rd chapter because I was like, I already know everything that's going to happen, and I'm so bored by this.
Yeah.
So I like to have a general idea. Like I like to know that somewhere I'm going to learn how Rufus got blind. I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure that out along the way, and that's exciting to me. It makes me want to keep writing the series, and that's been my favorite thing about the series is all the mysteries that I know I'll figure out eventually.
Yeah, and I knew there
tell
was a
ya.
3rd book coming because at the very end of the book, the last very few
The
sentences.
sheriff.
Yep, I was like, oh my god! And so I started Googling again to see if it was out yet.
I have to tell you, I usually figure out like halfway through, and that's when I stop reading them.
Okay.
And when we got to Lester and you surprised me. I thought about Lester turning on him, but until you pulled the gun, I wasn't sure.
But Bailey was
And
a
it
surprise.
was nice
Yes,
to have
Bailey was-
something
Bailey
that
was
I
a-
couldn't figure out.
Bailey was a great
Chasing the
twist.
Devil's
What was
Tail.
the
David,
Allison? Allison?
My good
Allison.
friend David, what's his name? God, I can't remember from Atlanta. Great book, but
Chasing the Devil's Tail.
yeah, and
Is
it's
it a
been out.
crime?
Yeah.
But
Huh?
Is it crime and mystery? Or?
It's mystery. It takes
Okay.
place, and he's an Atlanta writer.
Okay.
This is like probably 10 years ago. But I think it offended him when I said, well, I finally figured out who the murderer was. But it's tough. It's and
Yeah,
I
like,
love
figuring
books
out
I can't
before
figure
that.
out. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I don't want to finish it.
You gave some really
And I
good
finished
twists.
your book, and
I
I was
think
so
it was
glad.
Flannery O'Connor. I think I might get this wrong. but
So
it
we
says
have
so.
a neighbor who was in college with Flannery
Oh, wow.
O'Connor, Jane Willingham.
Who, what, honey?
Really?
Yeah,
Huh.
Jane Willingham was in college with, they were roommates.
With
Well,
who
this-
now?
Right.
With who?
Jane.
With
Jane
who?
Willingham.
Flannery
Jane
O'Connor.
Willingham.
Yeah, but with
Flannery
who?
O'Connor.
With oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
This quote's been attributed to her. I don't know if she really said it or not, but if the writer is not surprised, the reader's not going to be surprised. And so I like to surprise
Very good.
myself. And a lot of times, and the ending of Heaven's Crooked Finger sort of did surprise me because
Oh my.
I couldn't decide the whole time I was writing, is his dad really alive or is he dead?
That's what kept me.
I really couldn't decide.
And that was a great twist too, because
was
it
his
was
name?
just like,
RJ?
The choir boy.
Oh, Choir Boy, yeah.
I thought he was dead.
Yeah, and then he had the side of his face kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
that was
He
good.
must have had it immune.
So,
That was a really
about
great
that,
visual.
I had several like great lines in the book that I underlined as I was reading. And so my question was, for some of these, and I'll read you 2 of them that I marked. One of them was, some people can reform and some people just get by the best they can with their flaws. And another one was, his truth remained so unquestioned it became a force unto itself. It was the kind of truth that could crush a man with more intelligence and therefore more doubt. Are these the kind of lines that happen to you as you're writing, or are these ideas that find a home
Yeah,
in the book?
I think those are things I think about a lot.
Oh, that's
like
good.
the second one is something I thought about a lot. Is like the more doubts you have, you know, the less you can argue with somebody in a way, because you're going to hear their argument. You're saying, well, you know, that maybe there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
And when you're just so sure of yourself, I mean, you're gonna win just by virtue of being sure of yourself, whether you're right or not. I don't remember what was the other one. Oh, yeah. I feel like that's me. The reform. I'm not gonna be a person that can just like totally change my life, but I'm just gonna have to deal with who I am, and I guess that's kind of how. Like I need to lose 60
So these
pounds
were
or
nuggets
whatever,
from
but I'm not
outside
gonna
of the
do
book
it.
that-
What's that?
These were nuggets from outside of the novel that kind of found a place.
Yeah,
as you were writing.
and that's everything is like that for me. Everything. Like I've been listening to a podcast recently. It's called Weird Studies. If you guys want to hear
Oh,
a
I love
really
podcasts.
cool podcast that's going to blow your mind, it should be called Weird Philosophy, because they're basically talking about philosophy, but they're sort of like the weird edge of philosophy. And that stuff keeps finding its way into the third book. And
Really?
it just because it's on my mind.
Have you listened to Shit Town or S Town?
Yeah.
Okay. Has
That's great.
everyone else done
Of the
that?
what, honey?
If you haven't done
What?
it, you must do
What
it.
Yeah, that's
you
about
say?
20 miles from
Yeah,
here.
that's not far from where
S-Town.
we live.
It's in Woodstock,
Oh, jeez.
Alabama. It's in
Stands
S-Town?
for Shit Town.
So when I first started this podcast, I thought I don't want to listen to this redneck crap. So I stopped, and then I started it again, and I was hooked. But it's a true story, in Woodstock, Alabama. So that's another thing. But you have to listen to S Town. It's on podcast. You must do it.
John B. the
John
main character,
John
he's a
B.
genius.
McElroy.
He's a genius and
Yeah.
a real original.
Yeah.
I mean, he puts Rufus to shame.
And I actually drove there. So has everyone seen the movie Big Fish? So
Yeah,
the
I've seen it.
movie
It's been a while.
set was near Montgomery on this little island. The movie set with the town of Spectre, Alabama, which is a fake city. It's still there. The movie set. So you need to watch the movie Big Fish. Have you ever thought about doing some type of ghost story?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, in fact, my collection has some stories that would be probably considered ghost stories, and
Just take the
my
technical to
first novel under my name, some people call that somewhat of a ghost story too. But I love ghost stories. Yeah,
Did you ever see the movie Ghost Story that was set in Woodstock, Vermont?
it's just based on the Straub book, Peter Straub book. I read the book Ghost Story.
No. This is a movie with Fred Astaire and a lot of the older, whatever that era is with Fred Astaire, 40s. So it's a movie called Ghost Story, and it's set in Woodstock, Vermont. And
Okay.
Diane and I went there, two seasons ago. But it's this fantastic story. And when I started your book, I thought, oh my gosh, this is a wicked kind of ghost story because of the dad.
Yeah.
So you have some really good, I think, future books that could be a wicked ghost story.
Yeah, I that's
Something
always the
in
stuff that
Alabama
interests
that's
me.
because southern ghost stories are the worst. They're the most fierce.
What was?
Southern ghost stories.
It was worse?
Southern Gothic
Oh, the worst.
ghosts.
Oh,
They're the
yeah.
and the best. For people who love ghostly things,
Wait, they're the worst or the best?
the worst and the
I
best.
go to the Shining
the best.
Hotel.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we
Question
got
about-
into. I'm sorry, we got
No, no,
into it.
go
We
ahead.
have an acquaintance that leads ghost tours in Charleston, South
Yes.
Carolina.
Oh my
And
goodness.
his name is Eddie Macy. I wouldn't call him I mean, he knows who we are when we come, and he. The thing about the ghost stories is the way they infuse the history of the city with the story.
Yes.
It's not just come with me and we're going to see ghosts. I mean, that's kind of hokey, but the way they tell the history of it as well. And in Charleston, Savannah.
But you could do
you know.
that somewhere in Birmingham or Montgomery or
We've talked
wherever.
about that
About
before,
that.
but
You
How
take
do you-
something
I want you
in
to stick
the
it all over because he's awesome.
Thank
And I
you.
look forward to reading the third book.
How do you, when things, like y'all are talking about, Charleston and Kimmy's talking about, things that are true, but it's how do you keep from getting sued? I have a little stack of things from a close by community that, I mean, some of them would be backed up with police records, but you know, it's not to be mean or vicious. It's just things that people don't know. How do you do that without
I don't understand.
I mean,
exactly
if it's
what
I don't understand the question either.
What?
You mean without
do
infringing
what?
on people's?
Like
Well,
in the writing of
That's
a
why he
book.
said that. That's why he said that. He's
right,
in a
well,
medical
you're saying
community.
short stories.
Is this somebody we know?
Yes.
Well,
Oh,
they're
snap.
no,
I can tell
truly,
by the
truly.
way
I'm saying-
you're putting
I'm
your
in
fingers
short
in your hair at somebody
But
we
some of this I
know.
remember because when I was a kid, about a murder that took place, and I know a lot of details, because one of the women that almost was killed was friends with my mother, and blah 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 blah. It was tragic. It was tragic, but it was in a
It's a
business-
woman's club
It
murder.
was in a business on Main Street. It was, and I'm sure it's in the record somewhere. It was 44 years ago. How does a person do that without somebody coming back and suing them?
I don't think they can sue you for. I mean, is you're
Public
telling.
record.
Yeah, I mean, if you're telling a story that really
But what if I'm
happened.
I
telling-
can tell you.
What if you're telling something that
Ginger.
is not in the public venue?
Ginger.
That's it.
Ginger. My
You changed the
Ginger.
name.
Ginger, my-
James, what dear?
I can tell you. My stepmother was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Your
And they wrote a book
stepmother?
about it. Yes.
Where?
And they wrote a book about it. And
Wait a minute, who wrote?
Where was this?
Wait a minute, wrote a
back
book
in
about
Louisiana,
it.
she was murdered by a serial killer. And they wrote a book about
Where?
this in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And they
Okay,
wrote a
thank
book about this serial killer. And some of the things that she put in that book about my stepmother was not true,
Mm-hmm.
was not correct.
Oh my God.
And we could not sue, or we could not, like, we could rebut what was said in there about her, but we couldn't, and because it was public record, and she had it, and in the beginning of the book, or the end of the book, I can't remember, she had a disclaimer and said that, you know, this is not exact thing, you know, so she did
I think you also have
I
to
just
prove
wondered-
intent, that there's some intent to
Right.
slander the person or something,
Right,
and that's
right.
really
I
hard to
just
prove.
wondered if you would run it because you have so much history from the North Georgia.
Well, I just
Mountains
make
and all.
everything up.
yeah, he
That's
said it
the
was,
thing.
he said it was, he said
Yeah, I
it
mean,
was make
nobody could ever say, I mean,
Yeah,
I might
exactly,
base it on
Cooley
real people
County.
that I knew, but nobody
I
could
got
ever
you.
trace
But I
it.
think you
That
should
answers
make
it.
up some
Thank you.
wackadoodle southern serial killer. Did you know that most serial killers are in the north because of the cold?
Yeah.
Remember Gaines? So because
serial
because of the
killers at the exact
cold.
same time as
So
that.
I think you should like
you go up
create
there?
this like wackadoodle southern
go to
serial
LSU?
killer with some kind of like weird fetish, like
You what?
he likes like
of Jeffrey Dahmer.
yeah, so he likes like leopard, he likes leopard high heels or something like that. But you can. So there's so many things that you need to do, and I'm so excited for you to do
All
it.
right, well,
In the South,
I want you to stick with Earl Marcus.
well, that's my problem. Is like I have ideas for other books, but right now I'm at a pace where I can only write about a book a year, and that's so. I don't know when I have to finish this, get the Earl Marcus stuff off my plate before I can do something new.
do you
I-
outline?
Do you
You
have
do
so
an
many
outline.
books that you
I
have
tried
to
it one
do?
time.
No,
Doesn't
she
work.
said no, you don't.
He also spends a lot of time in the car with his best friend, and his best friend does nothing but bring up ideas for him to write about.
Yeah, loves it.
So I need to stop.
You know, one of those did make a short story. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm telling you,
Well, that's
this,
wonderful.
you know, it's just like that Janet Ivanovich, whatever her name is. You know, I love her. I can read her book, you know, in 1-2 days
Not
because
me.
I'm just like laughing. I mean, I have to put the book down because I'm laughing so hard. And Earl Marcus series is, I'm telling you, when I read that last few lines, I Googled to see if you had another book, and you didn't. And so I was like, dang it, I'm going to ask him, please tell me there's going to be another Earl Marcus
Well,
book.
this is what I need you to do: is you tell all of your friends how excited you are about my books.
I will.
Get the word out.
Because the word of mouth is huge.
Picture for Facebook.
Oh yeah, we got to get a
Before we
video.
go.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
does it help, like, for the Atlanta Full County Library, you know, they have books and stuff, and does it help for us to recommend
Yeah.
that you add the book?
Absolutely.
That's a great idea,
Yes, if you
Eileen.
buy, like wherever you buy the book from, if you buy it online or anything, so you can go online and you can, you know, you rate the book and then you give a little, you know, you give a little synopsis or whatever about the book. And the more 5 stars he gets, the higher it goes up, and the more that Amazon will like start promoting it.
Yeah.
Or you
Make
know,
more
if
visible.
they put like if you do heavens And if he has enough reviews on the book, it'll come up.
And on Goodreads
Goodreads.
as well. Goodreads as well. And plus, and not to toot our own little horn, which I'm going to toot our own little horn just a teeny bit. So when we post this video, which will go to all of our readers, we will ask them, you know, buy the book, rate the book, and you will be on YouTube. So I don't know how many videos you have on YouTube, but you'll have one from
maybe.
us.
Very nice.
There's
It's
a
good.
few,
You
but I've
y'all
never
are dressed
watched.
well and
I
everything.
probably won't watch this one either.
Well, no, I'm going to
I-
send it to
I
you.
can't watch
You
it.
have to watch it.
I can't watch these kind of videos.
I
He
will.
doesn't like to
I'll
watch
watch.
himself.
It's hard to watch
He doesn't like to watch
himself,
himself,
isn't
but
it?
I like watching myself. So I
Can you send it to your
Right.
wife and have her watch it?
She'll watch.
Yeah, oh yeah. Becky will watch it.
And
She'll-
she's going to come to book club next week in
She'll be
Birmingham.
there, yes.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet her.
So we have to. So next year,
We'll have to read a second
our
book.
book club has to read his second one, and he has to come to our.
You have to
our
come
second-
next. And
But
we'll,
if the
Wow,
third
so
one's
y'all
coming
did
out
great.
in November, we may
November
read two.
2019.
Yeah.
Oh,
plenty of time
never
to read
mind.
book two.
Okay.
so when
Alright,
you
we
guys
can
get
do
back
that.
to your hotel tonight, you have to go up to the rooftop bar
Oh,
at
it's lovely.
Solis Hotel,
Solis.
Solis, and you have to watch the airplanes come in.
I've
Have
already.
you been there when somebody's on the track?
Oh God!
Isn't
So
that
in the
fun? You're
morning, so
driving
the
that-
Porsche headquarters are right beside where you
We
are.
saw the track outside our room.
In
room
the,
is
but
like
in the
on the 7th floor,
mornings,
we can
when the
see.
Porsche executives come in, there'll be 20 Porsches in a line that come
Wow.
off of the highway, and it's like a snake that comes in. They all come into the Porsche headquarters. It's pretty darn
All right,
cool.
I will toot my own horn. I had a hand in bringing Porsche to Atlanta.
Wow.
I and about 500 other people in state government,
That's pretty
but
cool.
I was labor, and it was the
She
fact
was, she
that
was
we
the
managed
director
to
of
take
the
the
state of
old
Georgia. so-
Ford plant that was sitting there for
Yeah.
decades, empty,
Turn
and
into
have
that.
that.
Yeah.
It's just magnificent. It's
Well,
magnificent.
y'all weren't leaving early in the morning
I-
because of your son having his wisdom teeth or daughters.
That's
That's
No,
my
that's
fault.
Linda's.
Oh no, it's
Linda's.
okay. Now I was gonna tell you, you can like walk in and do hot laps.
really.
Oh yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Well, on another topic, have
We
you
do
done
then,
a
now we're going
podcast?
home.
So
Are you going to do a
Have you done
podcast?
I have done a few. It's been a while. I think I did them all with my John Mantooth. I don't think I've done anything with Hank Early. No, I did do some podcasts.
So can we hashtag you with John Mantooth and Hank
No, he
Early?
said Hank Early only because he does work.
Well, it's fine to do either one. I'm just
So what were your podcasts about? Were they about the book or about the
yeah, they were
characters in
about the book.
Or?
Yeah, I did a couple before Heaven's Crooked Finger came out. That they did a lot more push for Heaven's Crooked Finger, and I think this is normal. They did a lot more media and push for the first one than they did for the second one. I think they just kind of count on, well, if people like the first one, they're going to buy the second one kind of thing, which is a little disappointing. But
The book cover was great though. For I'm very
Yeah.
visual.
I think they do book
So
covers
it was
really
very
well.
good.
Have you had much exposure other
I
than
didn't like the book cover.
ours in Georgia
I'm
or
gonna
in
tell you,
Atlanta?
I got to tell y'all this story. I got to, for Heaven's Crooked Finger, an author contacted me from New York and said her book was coming out on the same day. She shares my publisher, and she said, can we share a book launch? So in other words, I'll fly to Birmingham.
Who's
and
your
I'll-
publisher?
Crooked Lane. And she said, I'll fly to Birmingham and do your book launch with you, and then you fly to New York and do the book launch with me.
Oh, awesome.
Well, I got by far the better end of that deal because she came to my little book launch in Birmingham, and there weren't a ton of people there, and she was kind of like, she was actually a little bit scared to be in Birmingham because she was so negative.
Oh my God.
Serious, she was.
It's that Bible Belt thing.
Yeah, but then when I went to New York, we did it at this legendary bookstore called the Mysterious Bookshop.
Yes,
We have some pictures of it.
absolutely.
It's just wall-to-wall books, and they have ladders because the books are stacked very high on the ceiling. And when I stood up to read, I got maybe 2 sentences out before a man in the front row said, he interrupted me and said, "Is that your real accent?"
Oh,
And
Oh,
I was sort
that
of
makes me so
stunned, and I was like, "Yeah."
no.
And I think he thought that I was trying to play up the Southerner a little bit, like.
And you know what? That's
They
when
did
you go
not.
into your Scarlett O'Hara mode.
I was
Yes,
already in that mode.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
On
will
the South,
never
you
go
can tell the
hungry
genuine.
again.
That's right.
But you ask about other events. I have been lucky to do some things like that, and I recently did a library thing in Spartanburg and a book thing in Charleston, which was awesome. wife and I got to go over there for our 20th anniversary and
Aw.
do the book thing. And,
Sweet.
so
You should send, we should
But
you should
nothing
send
in
an
our
autograph.
area till now. Not,
not in the Atlanta area. I would love to do more.
You should
But
send,
you do
should
now.
send, somebody should send, your publisher should send Heaven's Crooked Finger and In the Valley of the Devil to Fox News, because they love reading books.
I think it'd be fun if you did a podcast where you had somebody do a voice of one of the characters and he wrote this script
you know,
just for that character to be talking on this podcast.
That would be fun.
To sort of be this supplement to the book.
Not yet. That's something that I've asked my agent about, and he said it's just they're going to wait until the way it works is the recording companies make offers on books. So we haven't had an offer yet on the book, but I'm hoping it's coming soon. Because I know a couple other authors from Crooked Lane recently got deals, and I'm not sure why, because I feel like I've sold as much as them.
If that will prompt them.
I don't know.
Oh,
So on Hoopla, which I'm a member of, which is part of the library system, if it's an app. So if you're a member of a library, download Hoopla and you get audio books, movies, and e-reads for free. You get like 10 a month. So are you on that as well?
I'm familiar with it. No, there's no audio version of the book yet.
no, but we're saying we're trying to figure out how we can prompt an audio version.
I mean, yeah, that might
You're like anything, please.
yeah, anything works.
So guys, so they are here in Historic College Park, staying in Hateville. Where should they go to breakfast in the morning?
Dwarf House.
where?
House.
Across the street from your hotel. is
So
Dwarf
I
House.
tried to tell you guys. So Truett Kathy, who is
The
the
Dwarf
owner
House.
of
No, not
Chick-fil-A,
Right.
Yes.
it's right across the street from where
Don't
you
tell me
are.
that.
That's
Or
the
you can
original
come into
Chick-fil-A.
College
We
Park
saw the
and
historic
go to
marker. Is that the
That's
first?
the original.
That's the
Dwarf
first,
House.
that's the original.
Yeah, that's the first one that they ever did. There have people who've been going there for 40-something years.
And
and
so that was the first
that
one, the one we
was
saw.
the
the
very
first one.
Yeah.
And you need to
Didn't
ask
look
for a
like that,
blue menu.
Different
Yeah.
tiny house.
At Chick-fil-A.
And you'll see the
Ask for a-
dwarfs.
Is
If
that
you
like
We're gonna be
what the
there
old
tomorrow
ladies
morning.
look
so
You
we're
have
gonna
to
there.
you
I'm
have to
gonna tell you
go
well.
just
I will
because
come
you'll see the
get y'all a tour of
dwarfs
the
on the
kitchen and
wall.
everything.
Which
And
is the,
that's
Part
called.
of it is full
it's the
service.
dwarf house. That's the
So part of it,
original
the
one.
waitress will come to your
I mean, you
table.
can't,
Yeah.
Can't miss it.
yeah.
Well, I think we really want advice on is where to go after this.
Right,
because-
Dad?
Where?
Wait a minute, what do you want? Do you
What
want
do you wanna do?
food? Do you want bad liquor? Do you want company?
Well, we already went to the Arches Brewery. We like to go to the
That's
breweries.
Yeah, we went to that.
But
other
there
one.
doesn't seem to be a lot of other breweries
Oh, what
on
about
this side of
Girl Girl?
town.
The
What?
only one I know of
That's
was
right,
the
Mayfield.
the
Okay, that might be
Growler.
an
Did you go to
There's also
Valare,
Monday
which
Night
is my
Brewery.
favorite restaurant in the world? Which is
No, we
You
actually
don't wanna go
just
there.
got in time to kind of
Yeah,
come
we
over.
pretty much went to the hotel and came here. Went to the Arches and came over here.
But the bar, which in your hotel is the bomb. I mean, people will
Yeah,
come
we'll
from all
definitely
over
check
to
that
go
out. But
there.
I'm just thinking about a tight place to go before that.
Um,
Maybe go
Well,
to-
you
like
need to go.
the-
So I would go to the Optimist, which is downtown. You
Yeah,
can
I
go
don't
to
wanna
No
go down
Moss.
You want to
In
stay there,
Hateville.
right?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, yeah, we're going to the
Oh,
break.
here you're
Well,
thinking.
Hateful.
Go
Break
go
pad.
to the
This
break
is
I got
pad.
terrible alcohol.
Conner Rugby and Main
The
Street.
break pad is right around the
I
corner.
drink there. If you want,
What's wrong with the break
if you
pad?
want,
No, go to the break
Hey,
pad.
your kids work there
the
because
break pad is our hangout.
Yeah, the break pad is the neighborhood restaurant.
break pad is
I teach teenagers. I hear that all the time.
the
You
break
know,
pad is
If
isn't
you
break pad a
want a
historic
good hangout, the
landmark?
one that used to be in East Point's now in
Yes, it is.
Hateful, it's on the
It's
same
fun
side as the
businesses.
Dwarf House.
No.
No,
They
don't,
have
now go to
it.
Fun
They got
District.
fish food, they got food.
I'm
Is
gonna
that
get
the-
you there.
is that the corner tavern?
Fun District very well.
Is it called the Corner Tavern?
Yeah.
That's what the
That's what we
bartender
passed
at
that.
Arches suggested, but I don't have any idea.
Over
I've never been
here,
to this part of
it's,
the
it's across the, it's, you know, it's across the tracks on the same side as
An
the,
old gas
Or-
station.
as the,
We're having some dissension.
Dwarf
So
House.
if you put break pad in your GPS, it will take you.
It's
It's
right
like
on Rugby.
it's
The
like
break
2
pad
minutes
is
from
cool.
here.
Hey, Prime,
The Corner Tavern's really close to your hotel.
Are you going to be
You'll
in
see.
Birmingham?
if you're going, I'm going.
No.
Okay, because yeah, you live in the
Yes,
vibe.
it is. There's a
We need you.
I can do it.
Oh, the
If you
corner
come next week, I'll be
tavern.
there.
Yeah.
Good beer, but not good food.
Like the thank
I was a
Yeah.
substitute for the wife tonight, but the wife is going next week, so I don't know if I'm invited.
Now, bet
Good
the
beer.
world.
Well, that's what we're looking for is good beer. Because we want to try some of the local Atlanta beers, but we don't want to go, most of the,
Sweetwater, what is it, 420?
well, sweet, but that's all on the other side of town.
Most of the microbreweries we were looking at are
No, you can get
Buckhead, Midtown, north of Atlanta. We didn't want to, we just,
We went there on the
We
way
would
from the
think y'all are
hotel
being snobs.
here. What?
We would think y'all are being snobs if you went to the bars and the
So
next-
I would
Yeah, I don't have a
suggest.
desire to drive
an
So
hour.
I would tell you guys
We
to
don't
go
wanna
to
do
the break pad. I would leave
Go to
Is that what
break
you-
pad.
and go sit.
Vote
and
for
go
break
to
pad,
the
somebody
break
vote
pad.
for
Don't expect to
And then I would tell you.
Walking.
and
Walking,
sit
okay.
outside if you possibly
So
can.
if you guys
Before
are
you-
so
you
close,
look
you
for-
have to go to
Yeah, I
Woodward
mean,
Academy, which is right across
Okay.
the tracks. If you're going to be here, that's our staple of this part of Atlanta.
And I would say
We
for good
came
local beer, go to
from
Corner Tavern, because if you get
Arches
too drunk,
and
you
it
can
was-
walk to the hotel.
You can walk
Where's
back
the
to
tavern?
South Central.
Corner
Corner
Tavern.
Tavern,
Yeah.
it's
I don't
literally,
remember. We came out of Arches
You can see
Brewery
your
and turned
hotel
right.
from-
But
Walked to the railroad
Volare,
We were.
but if you're hungry, go to Volare. Volare is my favorite restaurant in this area. I love Volare.
Tavern.
I don't.
And there's a good view of the airplane. My
No.
grandfather was an airplane mechanic in the War, and I would have fit
Your hotel bar
it. Would be a good view for the
where you
airplane.
talk is the best in all of the city for the airport.
Really.
The best.
She's right
We may have to go up
about
there and check that out sometime.
Right about that.
No.
Used to go sit on.
No, your hotel is the best in all of the city for the
And by the way, before I forget, where are y'all meeting next Monday?
It's incredible. You gotta go.
Where are y'all meeting next? Where is it though? The meeting next Monday, the book for him in Birmingham.
It's right next door to my house.
Okay.
You gotta come. Bring your wife.
That would be very cool.
Truly, come.
Kimberly, tell him he's invited because he was subbing for the wife tonight, so tell him so he'll feel invited.
No, I will get you invited. You gotta come though. Seriously.
She would enjoy it.
Yeah.
So they won't be as personable as we are.
Hey, everybody.
So I think that's our meeting, everyone.
tried to ask you
Follow
something
our
for
website,
15 minutes.
hcpbookclub.com. Boom.
Hush.